There's no reason for people in a society as wealthy, resourced, and technologically advanced as this one to not be thriving. Every crisis we are exposed to hourly is completely predictable and preventable if we connect to a shared vision of everyone thriving. Surviving the day is just not acceptable anymore when we know that thriving is actually possible. Welcome to the 100% Future podcast, where Dr. Katherine Ortega Courtney, Dominic Cappello, and me, Rubina Cohen, as your host, share insights, action plans, and inspire you weekly to take bold action in designing thriving communities for all. All right, and welcome back, everybody. We are back in the studio again with Dr. Katherine Ortega Courtney and Dominic Cappello. We have an amazing topic for you all today, the future of child welfare. And I'm your host, Rubina Cohen, and I have so many questions for you both. You are both doing amazing work. You just coming off of the heels of an amazing community forum with 20 different counties represented in the room. I know you guys are exhausted, but thank you for being here. And let's get to this important topic. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to know, what is child welfare? And one of the questions I think that's out there is, how is it set up to fail?
Yeah, so child welfare is a system that is really set up to intervene after things get bad. So I think a lot of people don't understand that. I was surprised once I left child welfare, which I worked for 4 years, how little people actually understand about that system and what it actually does. So basically the way it works is a call is usually placed to what they call the statewide central intake, which is a hotline number that people can call if they have concerns about a child. What I think people expect is that after that, something happens. But over half of the calls that are made are screened out. So over half of the calls that are made about a child that there is a concern about, nothing happens. So those get screened out. A little less than half get referred to what's called an investigator. So that would be at a local county office, an investigator is assigned, and then they go out and talk to the child, check out, what's going on in that child's life. Of those, the vast majority are not substantiated. So again, very little happens for those families. So what ends up happening is it has to be pretty severe. It has to be, what they look for is safety at the end of the day. Is a child safe in that home? If they're not, then that's when they get pulled into foster care. Now, as you can imagine, foster care is very disruptive and traumatic and not ideal. So what we saw while we were working in child welfare was, a system that's set up to intervene when things are bad. And there were very few opportunities to do anything to help prevent things getting really bad, which is why we landed on, what we really need is a system of support for parents before things turn into a safety issue, before kids are in danger of being, severely beaten or having a home with, drugs lying around where they're in danger of ingesting them or whatever it may be. Because basically the system was legally set up to intervene later. And what I think people don't understand is, like, when a call is made, if a concerned citizen, if you're a teacher and you're seeing a kid coming to school with dirty clothes or, some things that are concerning, you would hope that you can make a call and then somebody would come and do something about that, right? Like, maybe the mom just needs help getting a job or finding stable housing or getting access to food. There's no system for that, which is why it is so important to kind of build that safety network, which is really what 100% community is all about. So that's why child welfare is set up to fail. There's no system to prevent people from ending up in child welfare. It's like, if you're ending up in child welfare, you are in a bad spot and things are really bad for those kids in that family. And it's really hard to get back on your feet after something like that.
Yeah, I would like to add that when I got to child welfare, and that's when I met Catherine many, many years ago, the first thing I asked for was the org chart. I was actually in the domestic violence unit when I started in child welfare. And because I'm kind of a systems guy, I thought, oh, this unit, where does this fit within Child Protective Services? And then I know there are many units and divisions and programs. I thought, well, why don't I just look at the org charts? And I kept asking for the org charts, and I kept not getting an org chart, and they couldn't find any. I asked the training people, and these are the people that you normally meet when you come on into the child welfare system. And they didn't have, they thought they had some, but they couldn't find them. So I offered to design the org charts, which meant I did informational interviews with the heads of all the different entities. And it was a really interesting process. And I actually had graphics. I made it as clear as I could. And people were saying to me that, wow, I had no idea that entity did that, or we were connected to that entity. So there was a lot of confusion between all the entities. We weren't one big system that worked together with the knowledge of what everyone was doing. So imagine that's an organization. I mean, imagine if that was a private company. Their products or services would not get out the door. They would not be in business very long. So I think that, and I want to stress this part, and Catherine and I always want to stress this, the people we met working in child welfare were amazing people. Some of the biggest hearted, most caring people you'd ever meet. Mm-hmm. It's not the employees, it's the system itself that is set up to fail.
Right. And both of you have mentioned that in past podcasts and in all the conversations that we've had, this is systemic. And the format and the container in which this work is happening is not set up to help them succeed. And so that the child is failing. So why do families enter the system, and what does the data tell us?
That's a great question. And, we do a lot of trainings and we talk about what's the root cause or root cause analysis. Mm-hmm. We really like to know why. And this is not a question that's always asked when you work in the public sector. There are very visionary people working in the public sector who absolutely ask that question, but that's not the norm. Government tends to be very reactive, so they're not going upstream. So if you want to ask, why do families enter the system? Why do families become so dysfunctional, or why do households become so unsafe that law enforcement and child welfare is called in? We have to go back to another topic that we talked about earlier, which would be the social determinants of health. And this is a term our listeners will get very used to. What are the services that determine a child's health, safety, education, and overall quality of life? These are services, and they're also community environments. We certainly don't want toxic environments, and we certainly don't want a bleak community that really has very few services. So we have to go upstream and see when that child is born, and that mom and that baby go home. Where is the home? Can the mom get to medical care, behavioral health care, food security, housing security, transportation? We talk a lot about the 5 services for surviving. If those services are not in place, you can expect trouble in the home. And we're not even talking about the services for thriving. And we really like to talk about those, right? In terms of parent supports, early childhood learning programs, fully resourced community schools, and so on. So when you want to know why families enter the system, they don't have services. And also there is a generational cycle of adverse childhood experiences. when you grow up in a very violent or dysfunctional home, and if you don't get help, if you don't get treatment, you may find yourself as a parent doing some of the same things that really aren't helpful for the child. So this is why we have to get in early, and this is why, systems thinking, if we want a future where we put child welfare out of business because it's no longer needed, we have to go to every county in a state and make sure those vital services are working. And as for data, our initiative surveys a county. We are asking parents, to what degree can you get to these 10 vital services? So we know the problem, we know the solution. We just need to get to a future where there is the political will to solve this problem.
And going back to child welfare specifically, why do people end up in the system? The vast, vast majority of reports are about neglect. And that's another common mistake people make about child welfare is they think it's, physical abuse or sexual abuse. The vast majority of cases that are substantiated are neglect. Mm-hmm. So that means, no food, being left alone, left in unsafe conditions, things like that, which often, and we got asked this a lot when I was in the data unit at child welfare, are like directly related to poverty, right? It's not a crime to be poor, but when kids are in these situations, very often they end up in the system because of lack of access to resources. When parents, by and large, have the kid's best interest at heart, which is another common mistake people make is, these parents are awful, evil things. No, they're in many cases doing their best and have ended up in situations that they just can't get out of because they can't access the resources they need. And I pulled up the what they call the 360 report at CYFD, which is actually a report that Dominic and I designed, and they're still using that format, which is kind of fun to look at. But and it still holds true. This data is about 2 years old. But of the cases that are actually sent to an investigator, over 2/3 are about neglect versus any other type of abuse.
Wow. So, I mean, this is such a large issue, but I know that the 100% New Mexico initiative is already identifying some of the simple solutions. Like they're large and they're hard and it's hard work, but they're really quite simple. Dom, you say that quite often, and I like to, repeat it because I think that's what motivates us. So how do you start the process of fixing child welfare?
I think one of the first things that needs to happen is admitting that this isn't a child welfare problem. This is a systems problem. This is a society problem. How do kids end up in this situation? It is not going to get fixed if we only leave it up to one agency to fix it. It's just not. It's going to take behavioral health, medical care, food services, housing, all of those survival services that we talk about are not housed within CYFD. They're not housed within child welfare, but these are the services people need to be able to navigate that system, get out of the system, get the parents what they need. So I think, a huge first step is acknowledging that this is not a CYFD problem.
Yeah, we do get asked a lot about child welfare's future. And when we wrote Anna Age 8, we devoted a chapter to fixing child welfare. And some of our suggestions included becoming a data-driven agency. Mm-hmm. Look at the data. If you work in child welfare and you see that a county has very few services for families, that should be a red light going off. But the way child welfare is designed today, they don't have the resources to really do anything about that. So as Katherine said, child welfare, has to connect with the Department of Public Health. It has to connect to the Department of Public Education. The departments related to housing, to food security. Every state has state departments, right? And they all work for the governor. They work directly for the governor. So the governor has incredible power to make sure that these agencies are run by people who understand data, who understand research. But these are also bureaucracies, and that means, they operate very differently from from the private sector. Corporations, they got to be working or they're out of business. That's not the case with government. They're not going to go out of business. But there are lots of child welfare systems that are data driven, that are looking at these connections. Some child welfare systems are built within county government, so they have direct access to these services. So there are many models out there to actually solve the problem of child welfare, but it has to start with understanding that child welfare alone will not fix child welfare. But it's completely fixable.
Yeah, and I just want to add to one thing that Dom and I did a lot of work on in child welfare is to try to change the attitude of fear. It is such a fear-based system and organization that people are afraid of data because it might show that things are not going well, right? And we use that whole metaphor a lot of, data's a flashlight, not a hammer, like that kind of thing. But, I think there is still a lot of fear about, if we let these numbers out, or if people see, that kids are coming back into care, it's bad and we'll get in trouble. But really, if we don't have the information, how are we going to know what to fix and how to fix it? And so I think the culture needs to change in such a way that data is not used as punishment. It's open. It's used as a continuous quality improvement system, which is what we really tried to build into Anna Age 8 and what we use in 100% New Mexico. Data points out what's wrong so that we can fix it, not so that we can get people in trouble.
And I'd like to add that when Katherine and I were there, we saw that people were afraid of data. And so we invented a data leaders program for child welfare. So this was a 9-month training program, and the county managers, across the state were invited to come in, and we worked with them. And we worked with them on understanding data, understanding research. We were really using the framework of continuous quality improvement. It's a 4-step process. We assess, we plan, we act, we evaluate. And they all took on projects that would help their county and presented them at a big graduation ceremony in Santa Fe. And people, the reviews we got were very positive. And so we did that. We had 3 cohorts, and we kept growing, it was a good buzz. More people wanted to get into the program, and then it was just stopped. So, a data leaders program can be very helpful for child welfare. It can be very helpful for every state agency. And that really guides our 100% community initiative. We are data driven. We are, as Katherine said, it's a flashlight. This helps us find our way to the future.
Yeah, I love the flashlight analogy, metaphor. A couple of things that you both mentioned. I think that, the work that you guys have been doing and the contributions that you made to child welfare seemed very helpful, but also it really points to what you both are saying, in that we can't just look at one department or one organization to fix this larger issue that we're dealing with this child maltreatment. So I want you both to talk a little bit about what will it finally take to address child maltreatment, and how is 100% New Mexico initiative working towards that?
Well, I think you can look at it, in our philosophy with 100% community, 100% New Mexico here, with our 33 counties that we're working with and reaching out to, is that change happens from the ground up. So we're working on the local level to get stakeholders together to talk about the issue, to talk about adverse childhood experiences, to understand the social determinants of health, and to see how they can collaborate. So we need to grow from the bottom up, like a house and like a plant. You know, we start in the soil and we grow up, but we also need on the top these state levels, which are multi-million-dollar enterprises. We need them on board too, with a shared vision. So I think a shared vision on the bottom and on the top, and they're going to meet in the middle. And I think that's what 100% is doing. It's understanding that change happens on many, many levels, and you have to be working on all levels. But if it doesn't start on the ground level, and if you don't get buy-in, nothing's going to stick.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. I think what we've learned is that there is a huge number of people who want kids to grow up in safe and thriving communities. And provided with a framework, I mean, they take off and do it. We have had people knocking on our door for 5 years now, ready to start this initiative in their communities because they're tired of seeing their families struggle and the same kids come in and out of child welfare and all of those things. So Dom's exactly right. It takes the community first, but eventually, you know, the systems are going to have to follow because they'll have to, because things are going to have to work differently.
Yes, I love that. I think, you know, we're no longer just thinking, you know, a neighbor's kid or my kid or whatever. It's just like, we need to really be looking at this as a big picture. My whole community, has everybody thriving? Does everybody have access? And that to me is a systemic, you know, look at how we're going to change this. So, well, I really appreciate you both being here again for today's episode. Dr. Katherine Ortega Courtney mentioned the 10 vital services. We did go through that in depth in our episode 2. So if anybody wants to go and check out episode 2 to learn more about what those 10 vital services are, they can go check it out on our blog, and we'll have those links in the show notes. Thanks everybody for being here. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Join us on the Road to 100% New Mexico initiative at 100nm.org to learn more and get access to the podcast show notes. Want to stay more actively engaged with the movement? Then follow us on Facebook at 100% New Mexico and on Instagram at 100%NM. Until next time, let's take bold action to create a 100% future for all.